I want to welcome everybody back. Today, what I'm going to do here is try to talk about the WOT trigger group for the AR-15 and some of the trouble issues with it and what I think it is. And of course, you can't explain that $450 trigger unless you have a broken pencil and a bread tie. I just happen to have them both. Okay, we're going to look at the trigger on the trigger group on a AR-15. Now you see, that's your sear that catches your bolt. Built right in the trigger. And actually when your hammer's in the gun, your front of your bolt, and that's the important thing right here, it's the front of your bolt that pushes this down and locks them two together. So with your front of your bolt, with the front of your bolt doing that, it don't matter nothing about the back of your bolt on an AR-15. Now when you pull the trigger, that releases and goes off and hits your firing pin. But like I say, it's got this spring-loaded piece in there. Now that all works off the front of your bolt. Has nothing to do, your back bolt's just along for the ride. It's kind of in there for space. And what they did, you see this here, they cut your bolt back shorter, since there's no need for that. Plus, they didn't want you to get a full automatic trigger and make your gun full auto, so they cut some of that away. And if you look at this bolt, it don't have any. This is called the government bolt. The government wanted to make sure you could never put a trigger in your AR-15 to make it full auto. So they passed a law there for a while where you had to cut the whole back of the bolt off. You didn't have nothing on there. But to make the full auto run, you have to have a bolt like this with a great big space. Now the only thing and if you break your AR-15 down, you probably have an M16 bolt group. And the reason for that is mostly is weight. The smaller the strap is, the lighter your bolt is. And I don't know, maybe these are cheaper or what, I don't know, but that's a poor example. That's a 7.62 by 39 actually, but we'll go with this. I think this is an Anderson, yeah. There's your important, big chrome lines. But anyway, what they did, the M16 trigger, instead of all this working off the front of your bolt, it works off of the back of your bolt, off of that long back strap. Off of that back strap there. And what it does, that's where your bread ties comes in important. It replaces that sear with a thing that looks like that. Oops. Don't lose it. Price $300 part. Okay, this worked way better in practice. So you got this thing in there now, it looks like this. And no longer, let me find my right bolt. No longer is the front of your bolt, right there where that slant is. No longer is that cocking your hammer. It's working off of this back piece now. Off the back of your bolt. It's sliding in this groove now. Now of course this got a pin and a swivel. It isn't one piece. But this is like a little cam up on top. So you're in here like this. You got your trigger on the third position. This slides back, and just as it pops, I had this looking better before. Just as it comes back in it, as soon as it pops up into that slot, that sets your trigger. And then when it goes forward, it bends that forward, and it lets your trigger fire because you're on the third position. So this length, which that was a terrible view. I'll try that again. But this length right here is critical, the most critical point. Because what happens if this piece is sliding in there, your bolt's coming forward, your bolt's going back, it falls right off the edge of that and lets that go up in there and lock your trigger. And it's still touching, or almost touching. Your bolt goes forward a little bit more in the battery, boom, you just pulled the trigger. That's where you get your rapid fire from. So if that isn't 100% the right length, right there, if that's a hair too long or a hair, just a hair from what I'm understanding, too long or too short, your gun isn't going to fire at the right time. Or if your gas block or your gas tube or your buffer tube, if none of that is right, something's wrong there, and this thing ain't going back as far as it should, it's not going to work right. So one, you got to make sure your gas is right. Two, you got to make sure your buffer system's right. And then three, you got to make sure your bolt is long enough in here. Because for years, instead of saying, well, they'll say M16 bolt, but a lot of people call that the full auto bolt. But they ain't had to worry about the length of this for years because all the work was being done up here. So from what I'm understanding, I couldn't find my micrometer. I got 3 or 4 of them, I couldn't find one anywhere. But this length that used to have to be an exact spec to make that piece fall in there and lock your hammer, that spec is actually wrong now because it was never important. It was never going to be used as a full auto, so that spec really didn't count no more. You know, that was irrelevant in an AR-15, but in an M16, it's 100% relevant. So what you would have to do is find out what that length is and make sure you got a bolt that is with a micrometer that is exactly that right length. If not only will what happens when you stop before that falls up in there, if it stops with that on here, it didn't lock your hammer back. So when the bolt goes forward, your hammer's just going to follow your bolt on in and just put a little strike mark and do a hammer follower, they call it. So there's your whole issue right there, is that length. You got to be, from what I understand, like perfect there. And like I say, for so many years, it didn't matter. Look how short that one is. And like I say, here's another one ain't got nothing. So who's to say, between all the different makers making these bolt bodies today, who's to say that they're even worried about how long this is here? The main reason for using these bolts is for the weight. Like these here government bolts that they cut clear off, wrong one. They actually years ago used to sell a piece you could put in there to add weight to make your gun run right, because the weight of that would change your timing. And another thing you want to do, you want to pull that out and set your bolt up like that. Whoops. It's got to stand up. It's not going to do it on this table. If you stand your bolt up like that and it goes down by itself, that means you're wore out, your rings are wore out. That's another important thing. But the whole thing is the placement of this piece right here. Instead of it being up front and being used by the front of the bolt, go back to this gizmo. Now it's actually a 2 or 3 piece unit. And this right here has a pin and this here levers. And what happens when that goes up in your bolt, that locks your hammer so that it won't fire. And then when your gun pushes that forward as the bolt finishes shutting, that goes forward, that releases your trigger. Boom, it goes off. So it's actually just swiveling in there like that, working off the back of your bolt. So if your bolt's in the wrong place at the wrong time, or not going back far enough, it's not going to lock, and you're going to, what the hell the word I just said? Hammer follow. You're going to hammer follow, and that's what, and it going forward, if it's too long and that goes up in there, your gun's going to fire before it's all the way closed. And Sam, speaking to you, Sam Moore, 138, if you think about it in your video, you're seeing puffs of smoke coming out your gun, which leads me to think that your bolt's too long and you're pushing this shut and making your gun go off before your bolt's all the way closed. You know what I'm saying? Man, I had that slide in there perfect a little bit ago. When that bolt's moving, as soon as that pops up in there, your hammer's locked. And as it gets pushed forward, that's where you release. There's actually a pin right here. And this thing goes forward and back, just the end. And it has a spring and a follower coming in the back. If you look down in there, you'll see a spring and a follower down in that WOT or whatever, WOT, yeah. But you'll see that spring down in there. So not only do you got to make sure your gas system's correct, which I don't know what you do as long as your gas port's in line correct, and you're wide open or whatever. If you got an adjustable gas port, I don't know what else you would do there. But that and the spring, you got to make sure. I was wondering, you never took your spring out of your buffer. You need to check that and make sure it's no longer than 10.5 inches on a pistol. Because that bolt, you can see how that back would rub on there and move that front. That's what releases your trigger. But it's got to pop off the end and go up in the bolt to lock your hammer back. Just for a second. Your bolt just moves a hair more and it locks shut and boom, it goes off. And then this slides back and resets again. And it's just a little. That's a heck of a way to explain it, but that's about what it does. That turns the back of your bolt into being the most important thing on the gun, when before it didn't matter if you even had one. Now that's a true AR-15 bolt there. That's how they should look. That's a real old one. But now, sometimes you'll see them. And I probably have them, but I didn't want to tear all my guns apart. You get messing with them bolts, get them mixed up, then your gun ain't shooting right. Sometimes you'll see they're up here. Sometimes, they're all different ones, depending on the maker. So what I'm saying, they sort of eliminated the spec for where that stops because it never mattered. All your action was going on right here. This was irrelevant now. So now all of a sudden with that new trigger, that's important to be the correct length right there. And I watched a video where a guy actually mic'd them and changed them and got the right one and got his PSA running. And it wasn't much difference. As loose as your trigger is in your gun, Sam, that could cause it to have enough play to not set that correctly. Just that play you got in that wiggle on that trigger. And if you'll go online and look, you'll see they make a bushing. And I heard a guy say it in a video. I should have wrote the name down. Now I got to find that video again. But there's 2 bushings you slide in that trigger before you put it down in the gun and put your pins through, that make it tight in there where it won't shake. That's the first thing you need to do, is get that trigger in there tight. And the second thing I would do would be find out that spec on that full, just because they tell you they sell you a full auto bolt, how you ever going to know? You ain't making a full auto gun, they're illegal. So all them full auto bolts are talking about, you don't know if they're full auto bolt spec or not. It didn't make no difference because that back don't get used. Now all these triggers are making, putting that back to being important again. Yeah, that piece runs along there. As soon as your bolt comes back far enough and that falls up in there, your gun starts forward, boom, right there, it pulled the trigger. But as soon as it comes off the back of your bolt as your bolt's going back, as soon as it pops up in there, your hammer's locked. And then when it comes forward, like I say, and moves that, it rocks right there like where my finger is, there's a pin. That rocks that forward, and that pulls your trigger just as your bolt's going shut. That sort of gives you your timing. Where all that's done before if you look like on a regular AR, even if you hold your finger on the trigger and you cock it, it's still, see, it don't go off. You want to watch, you never want to dry fire these. But if you look, even I'm holding the trigger on. And it's ready to go for the next shot. But that was all done up front here. Had nothing to do with the bolt going back in the buffer tube here. Your AR-15 is all controlled by the front. That trigger's making it controlled by the back. Hey, and JA Hunter Plus, I'm looking for your piece. That hammer. I couldn't find it, but I found a bunch of other things I've been looking for, like this handguard for an SKS stock I got, one of them Bakelite stocks. I've been looking for that for years. So I did find something in all my looking. You know, on them ones, you have a piece sticking up in the back on that trigger. And that makes it work off the back of the bolt instead of the front. So that whole timing right there is where it's important. When that piece slides along there and falls down in there and relocks your hammer back, if that stops up here and don't fall in, it's not going to lock your hammer. And your hammer's just going to follow your bolt on in. Or if it falls in there and it's still too close, your gun's going to fire before it gets shut. And you're going to see smoke come out that you didn't see before. Like you did on yours, Sam, if you think about it. Yeah, if I look orange, I was working on my daughter's well. Got that orange water all over me. I can't get my hands clean. I look like Trump, huh? Hey, there you go. Well, I sure hope that helps everybody. That's my 300 blackout. 8.5 inch barrel. If you see that bolt still standing up. Another thing you want to do, you want to pull your bolt in and out. Make sure you don't have a catch spot. Sometimes they'll get a catch spot in them. You see where that pin's rolling in there? You'll get a catch spot. This thing works so fast in a blink of an eye that just a little bit of drag or a little bit out of spec means a lot because it's working so fast. Yeah, I'm going to look at this and see if it explained it everything I wanted to. This is the first video I studied on. I think I looked at every trigger video there was on that trigger. And swapping the bolt. I guess some bolts still go by mil spec standards, but they say different makers have different standards. And this right here didn't really matter then. If you have a bolt like this, it's never going to work. You can't have a bolt like that or one even that long. You got to have the long one like this. And I'm not sure if that's the right length. It could be a little too long, a little too short. It didn't matter. Like I say, that was irrelevant when your gun was a regular AR-15. It didn't matter. All your caulking was done right here. Your trigger set inside the trigger. Okay, like I say, I got crap tore apart everywhere. Here, I pulled this pin out. It'll come all the way out. Here, I'm going to have to drill this hole up. I've never had to drill one of them holes out in a Anderson loader ever. Look, you can see the pin still down in there. I'm going to take that apart and drill that little hole out all the way so that damn keeper can come out and catch it. All right, I'm going to look at this video and see if it makes any sense, and hope that helps everybody working on them. But one, your gas got to be right to get that bolt back far enough. And the way I'd test that, I'd put one round in, shoot it, and see where it locks back. If it locks all the way back on the bolt head, you know you're coming back far enough. If it still don't work, then you got to figure the length of that bolt. Is that stopping you and locking you in the right place? If that's too long and that piece can't go up in there and lock your hammer, you're never going to work right. You're just always, so the hammer's just always going to follow that bolt back unless it locks. And I see guys, now I seen one guy, now I'm not saying do this, and I would never do this myself, but he literally filed out the back of his bolt to the right spec so that piece would drop down in there and got it working. But I don't think I'd do that. I would make sure that I got me a good bolt that is mil-spec'd for a full auto rifle, because if it isn't, you don't know what you got. Especially when nobody cared about this length here before. They didn't even care if it was even there. Like I say, the only reason that they even put the bigger ones in the AR-15 is for the weight. Because this one here, you had trouble with, it was so light you had trouble with bolt bounce. Where it bounced when it shut because it was too light to hold itself shut. These were made by Colt. They were called the Colt government bolt. If you look them up, you'll see about them. I've had this for 20 years probably. This is the only one I've ever seen personally. I never went looking for any online, but this is the only one I've ever seen in my life. I guess that don't mean a lot. Didn't see a lot of things in life. Okay, well, hey, we're going to wrap that one right up there at 23 minutes. I want to thank everybody for coming back and giving me the views and that. Like I said, I hope this helps somebody out while I try to figure out where all these bolts go. I pulled out this one. This is a full auto one. And it's a brand new bolt. This gun's never been shot. Look at that. It's that nickel borax. I couldn't find my micrometer to start measuring these widths in the back. I only had 3 of them that had the full auto looking. And just because they say they're selling you a full auto bolt, don't mean you're getting a full auto bolt, because you'll never know. You don't have a full auto gun. And this don't do nothing, so how would you know? All you're going for is the weight. And Sam, whoever put that trigger in that gun, stuck that trigger in that gun knowing it wasn't going to work, and handed it to you, let you walk out, took your money. No, if they knew anything about them triggers, they would have knew the setup you got wasn't going to work. After looking at all them videos and listening to everybody talking, anybody that was installing them triggers should have knew before you walked out of that place if that was going to work or not. It just would have took a couple checks. I don't know. It had to be somebody just wanted to grab your money and run. Oh, I'm hoping it's not somebody you knew. But all right, well, I'm going to clean this mess off the table. Again, I apologize for the noise that damn oxygen machine. I even covered it up with my shirt. I shut it off the other day, forgot to turn it on. Yeah, check your bolt, make sure they'll stand up like that. And like I say, pull them in and out. If they're not smooth, you know, that bolt opens and closes so fast you can't see it. So imagine how just one little burr could slow you down enough to make that mess up as fast as that gun's running. Get that blackout in there. Okay, I'm rambling on now. Everybody have a good one, and I don't know what I'm going to look at next. I was going to pull out some shotguns. Or, I don't know, maybe some hunting rifles. I got some vintage hunting rifles. I've got some newer hunting rifles. I got Army guns converted into hunting rifles. And I'll go in there and find something. Everybody have a good evening, and Sam and Arizona Kid and up there in Canada. Why do I keep forgetting them letters? I want to say PA Hunter for some reason, because Thompson Center has a PA Hunter rifle. And you're what? JP Hunter. JP Hunter Plus. Hey, I love your accent, buddy. I could listen to you talk all day. I enjoy your channel. You too, Sam. Arizona Kid. VF Force. AR America. Hey, AR America. You flipped me out. I got a buddy that died about 10 years ago. If he would have lived to your age, if he'd have lived, not died, he'd look just like you. He's identical to you, sounds like you. I have a hard time watching your videos. I think of him the whole time while you're talking. It's like he's sitting here talking to me. He used to bring guns, I'd fix them, and he'd sit there and bullshit with me while I fixed them. You're him, and I'm starting to think, did he not die all them years ago? And he was a tree surgeon, and you climbed telephone poles. So I see you hanging off a pole, and I've seen him hanging off of trees. Me and him both worked. He was the foreman on the Davy Tree crew, and I was the extra guy who used to go out when somebody called off. So I worked with him a lot. Man, he's like, him and you is like twins. All right, I'm rambling on. Everybody go do something. Sorry for holding you up so long. Thanks for coming and watching my video. Hope this confuses somebody. I would say make sure your gas system's right, your buffer system's right, and mic that bolt. From what I see, that's the most important thing of all on that. And like I say, if that's wrong, that can make your gun go off when it's not all the way shut. And you'll see a puff of smoke out of it. Like we did in your video, Sam. And on that safety, I don't know what to tell you there. I see that the people that's suing that, I don't know what I did with that safety. There are people that are suing that WOT company for stealing their pattern that make that other one. What is it, a FTP or something? They have a safety that comes along with their trigger that has an extra groove in it. I don't know, maybe check one of those out and see if you could, I don't know, I'd call that place that bolt come from and try to find something out. Maybe they know where you can get them bushings, or, you know, give you some advice. But everybody that shows videos of that flopping around is kind of like mad for what the money they spent. And then you see guys that put them, they say put them bushings in, get your buffer weight right, and make sure your bolts the mil spec length of a full auto M16, and you're good to go. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Everybody have a nice evening.